Allow me, if I may, to tell you a very strange story. A story about the dead. And as you can see, I'm here in this graveyard. A perfect place to tell such a tale. And we all like to think that when the dead are at rest, they truly are at rest, but that is not always the case. Certainly not in the case of the graveyard bride. Now, the graveyard bride is said to live here in Errigal graveyard in County Monaghan. It's an ancient graveyard that has many visitors. Oh, they come to look at the old gravestones, and there's even a holy well here where some people come to get water. But I guarantee you, nobody goes out of their way to come to Errigal to meet the graveyard bride. There are many stories and versions of the graveyard bride of Errigal, but the one that I would like to tell you takes place in the year 1895. There was a young man, and John we'll call him, and he lived in the north of England. John was originally from County Monaghan, but there was a death of a close friend, and he decided he should return and pay his respects. He arrived on that faithful day here in Errigal graveyard in County Monaghan. And as he stood with the congregation around the grave, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Something flitting and hopping and weaving itself around the graveyard. And then he watched a strange figure float, hop, skip and sit on top of the gravestones like a strange bird. He could see it was a woman dressed all in white. But nobody else in the congregation seemed to notice her at all. Just him. And he watched as she made her way towards him. And she curled herself around him like a cat. And then she gave him a little kiss on the cheek. My goodness. John was so embarrassed. He was standing here at a funeral and this was going on, but nobody seemed to notice. Well, when the congregation moved away, John stayed, pretending, to have a few last words with the departed. But really, he stayed to see, to hear, to know what this strange creature was. The woman dressed in white whispered in his ear, "Oh, I have been here for such a long time. I'm waiting for a man to come who said he would meet me here, but he has not showed up. Will you just stay for a while just to keep me company?" And of course, John was happy to do this. And they stayed, and they talked, and she listened, for she said very little about herself. She didn't say her name, where she was from, where she was going to. John told her what he could about himself, and he made the fatal mistake of telling her that he was single. Oh yes, and an even bigger mistake, he told her that she was beautiful. And she smiled. And she said, "Oh, John, you are such a kind man. And it looks like this person I am going to meet has stood me up. So I would like to meet you again, if that's all right." John was delighted with this idea. "Of course," he said, "of course. When would you like to meet me?" "Any time, any place, anywhere," he said. She looked him in the eye and she said, "Meet me here at this very spot on the same day." And she gave him a certain time. He went back to the lodgings where he was staying in County Monaghan. And the following morning at breakfast, the host of the lodgings noticed that he had a strange mark on his cheek and asked him what had happened. It looked like something had bruised him. And John couldn't understand why it was there, but he told his host about the woman he had met and how she had kissed him right there on the cheek. Well, the blood ran from the face of the host, and he said, "That was no ordinary woman you met, young man. That was the graveyard bride of Errigal Truagh. And when she kissed you, she left the mark of the graveyard bride. And now that you have the mark of the graveyard bride, you have the curse of the graveyard bride." "Did she make a date with you to meet again?" John said, "She did." "Do not honour it. Do not, under any circumstances, return to that grave to meet that woman, because it will be the last thing you ever do." And then the host proceeded to tell him a few stories about other men who had fallen foul of this demonic bride. When he returned back to England, he never felt right. In fact, he became very depressed, and he stopped eating and he couldn't sleep. And all he could think about was that beautiful, beautiful woman in the grave. And no matter how hard he tried to put her out of his head, he could not. He knew the only thing that would help him would be to meet her in the graveyard at that time, at that day, the following year. And he came up with a plan. He said, "She seemed like a reasonable person. Surely if I go in and speak to her, it could be fine. Yes, of course, that'll be fine." Well, he did return the following year. And he arrived and he waited at that very spot, at that very time, which I won't tell you, but he knew what it was, and that's all that matters. And in the corner of his eye, he could see something white flitting and hopping from gravestone to gravestone, weaving itself around the stones, perching on it like a strange bird. Oh, it was the graveyard bride. And he looked at her and she looked at him. And as she moved closer towards him, she began to smile. But it wasn't a kind or a loving smile. It was almost like the grin of a shark. And as she moved towards him like a great snake, she reached out her arms and looked at him and said, "Oh, my love, you have come to meet me." And before John had a chance to say a single word, she lunged at him. And the next morning, John was found dead at the very spot where they had arranged to meet. The coroner said that it was a heart attack, but the people of Errigal Truagh knew that it was no such thing. They knew that John had set a date with the graveyard bride. And if you are ever coming to Errigal Truagh graveyard here in County Monaghan, and in the corner of your eye you see a white form weaving through the tombstones, hopping and skipping, and then perching on a gravestone like a strange bird, do not, under any circumstances, look into their eyes, because there is a good chance that you shall receive a kiss right here on your cheek. And that kiss will leave a mark, the mark of the graveyard bride. And when you have the mark of the graveyard bride, you also carry the curse of the graveyard bride. And I hope you have listened and taken heed, for it may very well save your life someday. Shinne an scale, Guramila Maigat. Thank you.